Let me introduce our first team of presenters from Decatur Public Schools in Illinois. Dr. Jay Marino is the Assistant Superintendent for Support Services for Decatur Public Schools. In his educational career, he has served in a really broad range of roles as a teacher, assistant principal, director of instructional technology, special ed coordinator, assistant superintendent for teaching and learning, and also serving as a superintendent for 11 years. Dr. Marino is also an international educational change consultant and works with schools not only in America, but in the country of the Netherlands in their continuous improvement efforts. He is also joined by Mrs. Terry Dyson, who is the assessment administrator for Decatur Public Schools. She is currently in her 17th year in education. Terry graduated from Eastern Illinois University with a BA in elementary education and an MA in curriculum and instruction. She has previously served as an elementary teacher and an instructional coach. So please welcome Dr. Jay Marino and Terry Dyson.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for the introduction. Give us just a moment. We're going to get a screen share set up, and then we are going to turn off our video and focus just on the presentation, and then you'll see our smiling faces live again toward the end of the presentation. So you probably saw by the title of our presentation, we are focusing on working smarter, not harder. And again, I'm Jay Marino, joined by Terry Dyson. I also wanted to just do a quick shout out. You know, this really takes a team to have any successful project. And of course, I would be remiss without doing a shout out to our data warehouse core team here in Decatur Public Schools. And that consists of DeAndrea Banner, Rachel Lindsay, Mike Hozire, Terry and I. We kind of serve as the core team, but we also have support from our research department. Special thanks to Debbie, Kamisha, and Joey, who are also in our office. And also, just another shout out to Mark and Toby. They've been a great partner for us. We really have some good think tank discussions. They listen. And we're just excited to partner with them, and hopefully we can showcase some of the products that they've helped us, I would say, bring to market as we're now using them in our district. So just a little bit about Decatur Public Schools. As you can see on the screen, just some basic information about our schools. And what I would say is that we have a very diverse student population, and we're pretty typical challenges that of an inner city, a larger inner city school district. We've got a pretty high poverty rate, a pretty high minority rate. And so with it comes all of those challenges. So this just kind of sets the tone for the type of district that Decatur Public Schools is. The last thing I'm going to say before I turn this over to Terry, and we're going to get into our live dashboards, I like to use this quote because it's really kind of describes how we use data warehouse. And that is a quote from Plato, who says, "Necessity is the mother of invention." And to us, that means when we have a need for something, we certainly look first to data warehouse to see what can we create, find, locate, or invent in order to work smarter and not harder. So you're going to see this theme repeated throughout our course of our presentation today. We will try and save a few minutes at the end for Q&A. We also know there's a breakout session at the end of all of the presentations, which we can get back into a little bit further. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Terry Dyson. Terry's our assessment administrator and one of the key partners here in our whole data warehouse initiative. Terry.
Good morning. Today I will be looking and focusing on the instructional implications of our data warehouse and what we use to help teachers and administrators drive instruction. So you see the tabs here on the left-hand side. We have a lot of things that you're probably seeing in your data warehouse. FastBridge is our universal screener. So we have our district data, we have our state testing data. But one of the things that we really use to help teachers plan instruction is our standards-based grading tab. And in our district, grades K through 5 use standards-based grading. So I'm going to show you an example of how we use this information to plan instruction. So at the top, we can filter the different school years and marking periods and grades, and then it gives us a list on the right-hand side of all of the standards that are covered by that grade level. Teachers are able to select the standard that they're looking at, and they can see how their class performed as of their last report card. So if a teacher were planning lessons on this standard, he or she could easily see how the students were performing and how to target instruction to meet the needs of the students that are in his or her class. Another district initiative that we've addressed using Data Warehouse is MTSS. We have really tried to focus our efforts on MTSS and refining our process, as well as making it consistent across our district. As of last year, we have started tracking our MTSS information through our student information system, which is Skyward. And then we're using that to load this information into Data Warehouse to give principals and teachers a graphic that's easy to determine what tier 2 and tier 3 interventions are in place in their building and what specifically the students are receiving instruction. One of the things that we found a need for was to organize our students by percentile range so that we're easily able to see who falls where and where our support should be. So one of the reports that we have worked with DecisionEd to create is this percentile range report. So you are able to pick the building and then pick the assessment. So for FastBridge, there are 2 reading assessments based on the grade level that need to be chosen so we can see the whole building. We're able to pick this year's assessments or previous years, the time period that we're testing. And then you can customize the percentile ranks that are pulled. So if I wanted to see the students that were in the bottom 10th percentile, I can mark that. And then if I also wanted to pull those bubble kids, I can mark that as well. And so it will organize the information so that I'm able to see where my students fall and able to target those students easily without having to pull a bunch of spreadsheets and organize. All of these are drillable. So if you were to just click on the bar, it will pull it. And this is all by grade level. So the code is over here. And if you forget what you've marked, it shows you down here at the bottom what ranges you have set. This helps teachers make instructional decisions based on the student performance on the district assessment. Another focus that we found we needed to address for MTSS was finding student information all in one place. So we're not digging into a bunch of different dashboards to find the information, digging into different systems. So we have put all of this information in one place. So we have a student profile dashboard for K5, we have one for 6-8, and we have one for 9-12. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. Up here in the top left corner is where you can select the student. Administrators can select any student in their building, and teachers are able to select any student that is rostered to them. So we have this coded, but their names do populate here. We have some demographic information over here. We can see ethnicity. We can see free and reduced lunch status. We can see if the student has an IEP. We can see from this screen if the student has ever been retained. We can also see how they get to and from school. So if a teacher were to pull this up and needed to know some quick information, they have access to this at their fingertips without digging into our student information system. We can also see their year-to-date attendance and their attendance trend. This is drillable, so you can see if you drill in on this, you'll be able to see specifically what days of the week the student is absent most frequently and what those absences look like. Are they excused? Are they not excused? All of that information is here if you drill into that graph. We have our district assessments here and our trend line for district percentiles and national percentiles. So depending on what teachers and administrators need during MTSS meetings. They have both of those at their fingertips. If they drill into this, it will then give them more information about the assessment. So we have reading and math here. This chart displays behavior, office offenses, as well as classroom referrals will be all displayed here. Once again, drillable so that you could get more information. We do have an intervention count here. If the student is having interventions in more than one subject area, they will be listed here, as well as the amount of interventions that they are receiving. If you drill in, you'll get more information about what specifically in reading the student is receiving intervention in. SABRS is our SEL data, so we can see if our students are at risk for social emotional issues, and if students that need to have those issues addressed, and what we can do to support them. And then finally, over here on the right is our standards-based grading. The top graph displays core subjects, the bottom graph displays non-core subjects, so it differentiates between the two.
So just to add to this, back to our theme of working smarter, not harder, and necessity, we had principals saying it'd be really nice when, if I have a kid sent to the office and I want just a real quick snapshot of this kid without drilling into the student information system. This was one of the main purposes that our principals asked for. And so we partnered, of course, with Mark and Toby and said, here's the vision. Can you help us figure it out? And this is one of the products that we've recently just put live now to all of our system. But think about it. If you're a building administrator and a kid's sent to the office, first thing we tell principals to do is have dashboard pulled up, pop in that student's name, and before you even say hi to that kid, you get a snapshot on what behavior, attendance, achievement, and of course, all the other demographics and information that are shown here. Think about parent-teacher conferences. We have that coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Teachers can now have this up live with their teacher dashboard as they're talking with parents about their child's progress in school. So these are all just different ways that we've tried to make this something very useful that people say this is way easier and gives us really good information with just a click of a button.
The other example I would like to show is the high school dashboard. The middle school dashboard looks very similar to that K-5 dashboard, except they do traditional grading instead of standards-based grading. So that is the only difference. For high school, we did find that we needed a couple additional fields, and we removed a couple things that were not as applicable to them. The principals were very interested in seeing the students' tardy count, which is a difference from this dashboard from the previous dashboard. We also have service learning hour requirements for graduation in our district. So there's an indicator for that. And then also the student's credit count. So we can see at the click of a button how many credits the student currently has and if they're on track based on what they need to graduate. Attendance and FastBridge data looks the same, as well as the behavior data. They had a focus on state testing data. They wanted that shown on the student's profile. So we added PSAT and SAT data for the high school students. And the only difference over here on the grading is their letter marks instead of standards-based grading. So that is a difference there on those two graphs.
Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple other pieces that we find very useful. And again, I'm back to what's the real need here. So do I need to switch dashboards? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to take a look right now. I'm going to give you a real life scenario. So when we say that necessity is the mother of invention, this will really kind of drive it home. So in our district, like many districts across the country, we've implemented a new cell phone policy, basically banning cell phones from our schools. And this was a big deal here over the last several months. And of course, as we started the year, one of the things that our Board of Education said is, how can we track this and really kind of know on a day-by-day basis, what this looks like in our district? So the first thing we said is we have a need for data. How can Data Warehouse support that need? So in our student information system, we created a new code specifically for cell phone violations. And then we went in and we customized in our dashboard the opportunity to real time. Actually, it's loaded nightly, so it's not a live database, but loaded as of the night before. I get a really quick view as to what's going on with the number of cell phone infractions by building. And then I can also see the other electronic device infractions that are separate. They may not have qualified for the cell phone violation, but there are other things we're looking at. So just a real quick example of how we can use dashboards and customize them in order to be able to answer questions like, how big of an issue do we have with this new cell phone policy? And I'm sure you're looking at that chart going, what the heck is that large blue line that goes across the screen? Well, that tells you some information as well that's helpful to us as we're looking at it. And again, I can right click, drill down, drill through, and see who those kids are, as well as the number of infractions by any one particular student. So just one more example of necessity driving the innovation and how we're using data warehouse in order to answer the question, how are we doing? What is this looking like in our district? I'm going to give you another example. We've got a teachers union here, and in our contract, we have, I think it might be a 48-hour rule that basically says administrators will close out discipline referrals. In other words, when a kid is sent to the office, they have about 48 hours in order to close out that referral, process it, and what this does is helps us know what are we looking at currently. Any given time, we can go into data warehouse and see as of the night before, how many open discipline referrals do we have that need to be closed. So what started off as a union issue that was brought to our attention. And of course, we said, geez, we're not really looking at that. We don't have an easy way to go into Skyward and go click on every building and go drill 5 clicks in to find out where that information is. So we had it in our student information system and we said, can we create a dashboard? So now what we have is this referrals not processed dashboard that tells us how many open referrals are happening in each of our schools. And of course, just because the numbers there, they could be within that 48-hour notice, but it tells us how many current open referrals there are. And of course, we took the next step and we've got a custom report that's emailed to all of the principals and myself. And it basically gives them their own data as of the date it was processed, which is every Friday morning at about 7:30 a.m. I can check my inbox and sure enough, I've got the email push. So even if principals aren't going to the dashboard, they're going to get an email push that we scheduled for every Friday. And so now this is no longer a union issue in our district. It was a long-standing item for a long time. Seemed like it was always on the agenda. And we no longer have this struggle because we've got real-time information to be able to monitor this, address it. And we also are all hands on deck. There are times where we will send our director of student services to a building. For example, one of our buildings has 16 open referrals. My student services director is looking at this and he may reach out, stop in the building and say, hey, what support or help do you need? So it allows us to also now become proactive in how we're supporting our buildings in helping close out these discipline referrals. So again, back to the theme, when we talk about how can we use data warehouse to work smarter, I want to show you another invention. And I want to give you a little context because it's kind of an interesting story that really drives home the point. So when I first got here, we would get a request every week from Aramark, who is our food service provider, because they had to plan for meals for the next 2 weeks. And they would use the last week of data, a rolling week-long worth of data to say how much food should we be buying for breakfast and lunch. So every week we would go into the system, we'd download the information, put it in a table, email it out and send it to them. And my staff was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And why should we have to keep pulling this? Can't we directly have it pushed to them? So I want to talk through this custom form real quick. So what you're looking at is a report that gets emailed every morning at about 7 a.m. and it's going to give you a 5-day running average. So I'm looking at Dennis Ladd School, and you can see as of yesterday, the 19th, 18th, 17th, 16th, and the 13th, which would be the last 5 school days, it will show you how many kids were enrolled, how many were in school, how many were absent, and what their overall attendance was. And you might say, okay, why is that helpful to us? So here's a little story. Aramark was preparing food for breakfast and lunch. And even though we were giving them this data, they were like, we still have leftover food. It's like we're over preparing. So in most school districts, you would look at the enrolled quantity and say, oh, there's 552 kids here. 480 of them typically are having lunch. So we want to create 480 meals or whatever the number is. Well, when you start applying an average daily attendance, you realize that on any given day, if you look down here, you'll see the 5-day running average is 92.1%. So as I'm ordering food for the following week, I'm going to take my enrolled quantity, take the usership of those who actually get lunch every day on average, and they've got that data. And then I'm going to apply a 92% of that in order to get what's going to be a really dialed in number for lunch preparation. And what we found is we're almost on the money any given day because of the method that we're using and pushing out on a daily basis. So we don't even get asked the question anymore. It's like this just runs in the background, but it gives all the people information they need. And I'll end this story with one more piece here. On the very right-hand side, you're going to see number of tardies. And if I go down through this report, it's just every school broken down. You'll see the same data by building. So I can always dial in by building. I'm going to jump to the end here, so don't get seasick. And I can see my running 5-day district attendance and what that looks like. But what I want to show you is, back to the top, I want you to look at the right-hand column. And this is first period tardies. We were able to code that in our student information system, have data warehouse pick up that field, and then in the report, it will show you how many kids were tardy or absent for first period. Well, first period is when breakfast is served. So now what they were finding is they had the lunch count dialed in, but they were over preparing for breakfast. So now they were able to take a running 5-day average and tardies and say, we can make 15 to 20 less breakfast because we now have some data and trend data to be able to predict that. So I just wanted to show you one example of innovation and the necessity that drove this innovation and how we immediately turned to data warehouse to say, how can this help us in our efforts, and how can we get our people to quit having to pull this information, but rather have a daily push for it? So that's one more example. I'm going to end because we've got just a couple minutes left. You'll be happy to know I've got ourselves on a timer and we're at 23 minutes. So I want to jump quickly and just show you what happens. How do you get people engaged in the process that are outside of education? In other words, we're showing you a lot of stuff that has to do with behavior and attendance and assessment and stakeholder feedback data through our 5 essentials and multi-tier system of support, MTSS, college and career readiness. But what about the other half of the organization? Half of your employees are in the educational side, and probably pretty close to half are in the non-education side. So I'm going to show you what we did with our nurses. And this was, again, necessity. Nurses wanting good information, and principals also said, can you take that data that's in the student information system, pull it into data warehouse, and actually create a custom dashboard regarding our health data? And of course, we're up for any challenge. Whenever anybody says, hey, can you Toby and Mark will attest to this. I'm usually on a quick email firing off, hey guys, here's the next thing that we're interested in. And they've always been very responsive for the requests we have. But this is what we do. Someone has a need. We say, how can data warehouse help us work smarter? And so this is just a quick sample. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but a couple of things that they wanted to see is in the building, which kids are coded regarding asthma, any allergic reactions, any of those kinds of things that are important, as well as reasons for office visits. So now we've got all of this data. We can look at it by building, we can look at it by issue, and we can even drill down by grade level or school year. So it's just, again, one more way in which we have the ability to work smarter by using data warehouse in order to pull those processes together. So I think what we'll do at this time is put our video back on and take any questions that you might have. We're at about 25 minutes, 30 seconds. So I think there's probably a couple minutes if there are any questions. So let me turn it back to anyone in Decision Ed who wants to kick off anything that we want to talk about further.
We do have a couple questions. One, how do you track your college and career readiness indicators?
Sure. So within our student information system, we actually have information where our Skyward program will calculate for us. Right now we have 22 credit requirement for graduation. So basically 5.5 credits is what would be required each year in order to be on track for graduation. So Terry's pulled up for us. Terry, you want to say anything at all about this piece of our dashboard?
So we have flags for each of the requirements for CCRI, and we have indicators as to the students who have met or not met that requirement, and we can filter by school and we can filter by school year. So we have here in the middle the different flags that are required, and we can see our students' attainment of those different requirements. All of these are drillable, so we can drill in to see who are our no's, who are our yeses, and we also put underneath the indicator so that anyone looking at this understands what a yes means and what a no means.
So this is a real helpful tool, especially for our high schools, to at any given time go into the principal dashboard, their school dashboard, and get a look to see what does it look like for my school as it relates to being on track to graduate and all those different requirements. So Data Warehouse is definitely a tool that has helped us keep tabs on that.
Great. Another question. What process did you use to determine what to include on the individual student dashboards?
Sure. So we'll jump back into that for a minute while we're talking about it. We'll go into the learning profiles. So basically, we started with essentially what would be important for literally, we call this the elevator speech. If you were on an elevator on the main floor and going up to the 10th floor, would you be able to articulate something about this student that would be meaningful, that basically gives a snapshot of what's happening with this particular student? So, of course, most of us are educators on our data warehouse team, and we had the ability to intuitively say, we know this is good information. We also had some stakeholders involved. We brought in elementary, middle, and high school principals and said, what would be useful for you? Here's some things we're drafting. And then we presented a mock trial of this to all principals and say, give us feedback. What else do you need? And they would say, hey, can you make that graph bigger? We really don't need that piece. Instead, can you add this piece? And we learned a lot. We were about 80% of the way there on our own, but that last 20% that made this highly favorable for our principals was that discussion, pushing it out to them, having them come with a charged device, and we basically let them click and play around, and then we took feedback. and then brought back the final version. But, there were some things that came out of this that we didn't think about. For example, they wanted a retainment flag. Like, how do we know if this kid's been retained? And we didn't think about that. So that was one of the pieces that we put on. Another one said, can we get the bus route? Like, when we're dealing with kids and I got 1 minute to figure out if this kid is a bus rider or a walker, could that be a tab on there? So you'll see that in the lower left. So a lot of this came from intuitively what we knew educators would want. And then that final 20% came from a user group within our district who said this would really be helpful. So the nice thing about this dashboard here, these are all data points that are somewhere on our big data warehouse. They're in one of those 15 or 20 tabs we have. But through the ability of Decision Ed, we've been able to actually pull any data source that is in Data Warehouse now. We basically create the real estate or the surface area and say, here's what we want displayed. Here's what we want displayed. So you could go find all of this if you wanted to click in multiple tabs, if you were just trying to drill down for something. But we wanted the quick and dirty snapshot on how can we create this to be user-friendly. And again, we tell principals, every meeting you start, you log into Data Warehouse and start with your school dashboard. And as questions come up, real time and on the fly. Teachers, you get a phone call from a parent, pull up the dashboard, pull up the kid, and you don't have to go sorting through all your files in order to be able to share with the parent what you're seeing in your classroom. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it might have answered the next question. You talk a lot about how your teachers are using Decision Ed. Your teacher dashboard looks very thorough and focused. Did you gather teacher input as to what they want to see, and what has been the response of teachers to Decision Ed?
We have taken teacher input into account when creating these dashboards as well. One of the biggest things from the student profile perspective is that district percentile. Initially, we were only looking at the national percentile when it comes to FastBridge. And teachers were talking about how they wanted comparison for their students and the rest of the students in the district. So that is something that we added to this as a result of conversations with teachers. In the same token as Jay was saying about the bus route, they wanted information very easily to find bus route up-to-date information on how their students come to school and how their students leave school, specifically for our youngest students, our K-1 students. If you know anything about bus dismissal, you know that it can be crazy at the end of the day, and making sure those little ones are where they're supposed to be so they get home safely. And so this allows teachers to easily be able to see if there's been an update on a bus route. They can easily see where the student is supposed to be coming, how the student is getting to school, and how the student is leaving school.
Wow, that's great. That's great. What are some of the methods you've used in your district to encourage district level usage of Decision Ed?
Well, I'll give you an example. We have an all admin meeting once a month. We had ours yesterday. And as we do a wraparound around the room from departments and schools, and we hear there's always like a share what's working and share one challenge you're having. And so one of the things that we do, and people are now getting accustomed to, is when we're sharing something and someone will say, hey, here's a challenge I'm having. One of the things that we do is say, can Data Warehouse help us address that particular issue? So yesterday, as we were working through this, we had principals talking about, certain issues that they were interested in. And I'm trying to think of the one example that came out of yesterday. It was related to behaviors. We're seeing a lot of escalation of student behaviors. I'm sure that's not news to anybody on this call, but we're seeing more and more at the kindergarten, pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade level, like some pretty intense behaviors. And we talked about, the request was, is there a way that on certain discipline codes, for example, assault of a staff member, an event that disrupts the entire school, we were able to hand select a certain amount of codes. And the next thing is going to be to do some custom reporting where we may have a dashboard that on certain high intensity behavior codes that we will have the ability to see that and then get some information that helps us prepare if we start to see it creeping or climbing in order to provide resources to that particular school or interventions for those particular kids. So my challenge yesterday to all administrators was push us to the limit. If you've got something and you want to know if Data Warehouse can handle it, I said, give it to us. We've got a great internal team here in Decatur Public Schools, and we've got a great vendor partner in Decision Ed. And I know without a doubt, if we have an idea or an innovation that comes from a need, it's an email to Mark and Toby, and they're on it. And all of a sudden, we're a couple of weeks away from production of something that we can bring back to our group. So again, kudos to our internal team, our external team, and Decision Ed. And the fact that I think people really like, we say, challenge us. Give us something that you don't think we can do in Data Warehouse and let us go to work on it. So it's brought out a few people who've said, okay, Jay, I'm going to throw one at you. Can we look at data this way? And Terry gets us all the time. And a couple of weeks later, we push it back and say, what do you think of this? So that's kind of been our process.
You all are very brave to ask that question. Well, thank you so much. I know we're going to have a networking session that Jay and Terry are going to be in at the end today at 2:00. We're going to have several networking sessions. But if you have any other questions that you think of through the day that you want to pose to them, that's a great opportunity that you can bring those questions in our networking session and see what other school districts are doing to handle, oh man, all these challenges. You covered so many areas. I'm really impressed. So now we're going to transition and check out to another one of our favorite things from our Decision Ed users. Thank you again, Terry and Jay.